Hello, everyone. This is Rosalind Henderson, and you're at the podcast Beyond Self Care Basics for Educators. We are dedicated to helping districts keep their best and brightest principals and educators. And we do that by teaching them advanced research based self care tools and strategies that we try to massage into the culture and help individual educators so that we're mitigating stress. Today, I have a real treat for you. I have Principal Pierre Orbe. I've been practicing that. And he's a principal at DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx, New York. And I want to thank you for being here sharing your insights into self-care.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Appreciate it, and it's an important topic.
Yes, it is. Give us a little bit about your background. How long have you been an educator slash principal?
Sure, I'm in my 25th year in education. I started a little bit out of college. I was working in a lab, and then I got into teaching as a it was actually an off ramp for me. I was supposed to go to medical school. My father had suggested that I earn some money on my way towards medical school since I'd already graduated with my bachelor's in neurobiology. And he had suggested, it's medical school is going to cost a lot of money, and you might want to have some sort of, a nest egg to be able to offset some of the loan costs. And so I started working, and he first suggested in my working that he suggested teaching because there were some flyers back then for New York City. I got into teaching. My older brother has some learning, deficits specifically that were later identified to be autism. That's the reason why I studied neurobiology, because I wanted to help children like my brother. And when I, learned about neurobiology, and I wanted to ultimately open up a practice where I would work with children to try and kind of like a physical therapy sort of way, but for the mind, help, children who were perceptually impaired, which is what they used to call it, um, learn how to connect with the social world around them, essentially training the brain to overcompensate in ways that you could, build. And that was my goal. And when I found myself in the classroom, I was inspired by many of the students who, while maybe they weren't as severely impaired as my brother, they all had something that they needed. And I got really invested in doing the work to help them. And I got noticed somewhere along the way. It's kind of a longer story, but I got noticed at some point by a principal by the name of Tina Foreman, and she was helping to turn around the school at the time, and I was crossing paths with her. And she saw something in me that I probably didn't see in myself. I wanted to really go off and do what I'd originally set out to do. And she really invested in me and gave me an opportunity and a path and guidance for how to lead and how to do the work that students needed. She was probably one of the first people I ever met that showed me an investment that went beyond, herself in education. Normally, it was about blaming others. And she was very invested in the things that we could do from a leadership standpoint to make the changes that we wanted to see. And I've been I was an assistant principal for her for about, well, I was total about 10 and a half years, but under her for about 4 years, and more than that under as a teacher. And then I eventually, I tell people this story, but I was essentially passed over for the role when, she retired, and there was another principal who took over ultimately. And I, I looked for an opportunity where sometimes, when there isn't the opportunity that you thought you would have, I found an opportunity where at a school that nobody wanted, that was considered the most dangerous school in New York City by the Daily News and other statistics that they cited. And it was on the closure list for New York State. And, I didn't have many options at that point. I had certainly been passed over, and that can be a humiliating experience, especially for someone who dedicated, this much time to a career and made a decision to leave another option that they had on the table,
Yes.
only to be passed over. That's and I think when we talk about wellness, there's a lot there, right? Like there's often opportunities where someone can feel underappreciated or not get something that, in this career, getting things, there are a few things that you get. Um, you normally end up giving, and that's okay. But there's some vital opportunities where you hope that you could get, and appreciation is one of them. And sometimes appreciation simply comes in the form of receiving the opportunity that you know you've earned.
Yes.
And but history has proven, and I would say God as well has proven that the opportunity was not meant to be there, and it was meant to be elsewhere, and it was meant to help children in a community of greater need. And that opportunity was I'm grateful for because I was able to come to a school that was very historical, where James Baldwin had graduated, and
Mm.
where Stanley and Ralph Lauren and many other greats, many famous people had graduated from, but I had fallen on hard times. And I was able to apply the skills that I had gained from my mentor principal, who had invested so much in me, my family, who had invested so much in me, and be able to bring a structure and listen to the people that were here. Because I think that that's something that I'd love to share in terms of wellness is I don't think you can achieve wellness or sustainability in any school environment if you're not willing to, as a leader, to listen to the voices of those who are around you, because that's that's the number one way that you can help anyone with an education is you have to hear what their needs are. And what I heard here were there were a significant amount of things that people or students and parents wanted for their kids, students wanted for themselves. And my job became very clear to simply follow the blueprint of what they'd asked me for and to make it come to fruition. And when you do that, you become a man of your word.
So, as you entering DeWitt Clinton, and it seems like it's a challenging school, inner city school fell on the hard times, like you said. What was one of the first things that you did to bring maybe some systematized approach or an order uh, to the school as a leader?
So I was able to listen to small groups of students to really understand what their needs were. They were very clear about what, for students that weren't attending as regularly or maybe were not in class as often as you'd like them, you heard, and as you said, we're talking about a school that's in the inner city. It's you have significant levels of poverty,
Mhm.
and it means something to work. It means something to gain employment. And sometimes school doesn't provide that connection. Students feel a disconnect. They see school is a road to maybe something that isn't for them,
Mhm.
a far off road to earning money maybe one day when they're struggling here and now. And so I listened to their voices, and they were very clear that, if they wanted, when I ultimately took the amalgamation of all the voices that they had, it spoke very clearly to me. And I think that as I listened, it became they want, if college is going to be an opportunity for them, they need to have access to it sooner than later. So they needed access to college credits before they graduated to see if this was something that they was going to be really useful to them. They needed access to work. So they spoke to that, and they said very clearly that they're often not being given an opportunity because they don't have experience,
Mhm.
that they don't have skills that translate to some work field.
Mhm.
So we provided certification opportunities for different career pathways based on the ones that they indicated they were interested in. So you have different career pathways with certifications, and then there's internships that we provide internally, not simply partnerships that we ask for. We do have those as well, but we built internships because we wanted students to have a resume that showed I have a certification there and I have work experience, albeit within our school building that nurtured us all together. But we were given responsibilities. We earned the job. We had to interview, and we had work responsibilities that had to be completed. And we have a reference for if anyone is asking about our ability to work as an employee.
Wow, that's really, really powerful. And to make that change in the school, how did you get buy-in for that? And that had to have been a lot of uh, persuasion and work to probably make that transition in the school?
Yeah, it was definitely for easy buy-in from students, that was easy, right? Because they're the
Mhm.
ones saying this. For the teachers, I would share with them what pathways the students are asking to be built. And it's sort of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, we'll have more students that come, and I'm explaining this to teachers, and I'm seeing which ones can add value to this plan that students want. Some of them were natural, right? If you had a music pathway, they were music teachers already in the building, so they now got excited that their music class wasn't just an elective, but it was something that grew a student from point A to point Z. And so they became excited. The art teachers, when they were seeing the students interested in commercializing their art to find ways to make it financial, like that was natural. It made sense. There were teachers that didn't exist in the building. So when computer science became something that the students wanted because they wanted access to programming jobs, and they heard that you don't need college necessarily for those, we had to find those people. They didn't exist in the building. For nursing, we didn't have nurses, so we had to find those. There were a variety of pathways that were developed. There was dance desire. We had to find the dance teacher. So we built these pathways, and that was different than like I didn't ask my English teacher or my history teacher or my science or math teachers to become something they weren't.
Mhm.
I asked them to support the students in the work that they already needed to do within their classrooms. But we were creating these pathways to turn electives that would normally just be classes that students would ask themselves, like, why do I need to take this? Electives were traditionally created to try and expose students to other subjects that hopefully might pique their interest and get them thinking about what they might want to study in college if it isn't hit in the four core. And we are existing in a world that kids need to get to a career sooner, or at least try something so they can determine if that something is for them, and they have to commit to that. So they were asking for this, and that's how buy-in was, I want to say, easy. It was, I honestly, more of the struggle was from teachers who were seeing this change happening, who weren't directly involved and were questioning it. I had teachers who would write within their union newsletter, the one that they share internally, but I'm not supposed to find on the floor, where I'd pick it up. And we were adding curriculum that was Project Lead the Way. And this was many years ago. And Project Lead the Way is pretty renowned, I would say, at this point, and pretty it's very it's got its a positive reputation. When I put it there on their newsletter, they wrote like, Project Lead the Way, and then it would say like dot 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 to nowhere. Um, which was quite telling about what we were dealing with. We were dealing with a culture on the teacher side that didn't quite believe in the students. They'd already tried many different things. However leadership had worked with them previously, it wasn't leading to a positive outcome. So that phrase right there tells you all you need to know, is that they probably didn't necessarily have a lot of hope that things were going to work out.
Yeah. Now, what about the district level? Did you find the district amendable and easy to? Because I always think of bureaucracy, and how long did it take to fully establish the changes that you wanted to see happen on your campus?
So I came in February as the third principal in that school year. So I was the last hope, and I was told as such. And so as far as support, I had all the support needed. I mean, I was probably in the newspaper like every other month for something. There was a lot of calcification, a lot of pushback from the teachers and from the union side, and that's okay. From the district level, we had a lot of support. This school was on renewal, which was a program back then under Bill de Blasio, and Carmen Farina was the chancellor, to take all the schools throughout the five boroughs that were severely underperforming and infuse a lot of support into them. It might have gotten a lot of critique for its financial input, but they put a lot of strong supports in place. For me, my supports really didn't, I was fortunate. I had a lot of great training. I knew how to execute what needed to be done. The support that was needed was really just when the complaints come to you, those are going to be in the form of grievances. How will you distinguish, what is valid versus what is not? And they could very clearly do that. They could mostly see that, the complaints that were being brought up were, not grounded or substantiated in any way. And, let's continue to do the work we needed to do. And so there was a lot of clear support in place from the district level in terms of what I needed. I mean, I already knew how to program for this. I knew how to budget for this. Like I said, I was fortunate to have an incredible mentor who had provided, invested in me. And so where another principal might have needed, how do you like create a master schedule that's going to show these classes? Where are you going to source the curriculum? How are you going to pay for that? All that. How are you going to set aside money? Like I'd already been doing that. I did that as an assistant principal under a great principal. And so to now be put in place to do that work, I didn't need support outside of just when, whatever hearsay, fabricated stories come up to try and close us down. Is the support there? The chancellor sat with me. She sat with me and she went back and told everyone that like, I had a plan and it was going to work.
Um,
And
that, oh, wow, wow, that is stellar. Just just thinking of that, the fact that you had district support and that the school was coming along with support. So my question is, let's put this together with self-care and wellness, because listening to the students, seeing what they needed, providing for that, how can you tie that in to a healthier, maybe work environment, a healthier school, wellness?
absolutely. I mean, we've come so far. I mean, I believe really that everything that I've done at this school year over year has not been some sort of like brainchild of mine. It's always about like keeping your ear close to the ground and hearing what the needs are from students, from staff, from families. And so year over year, I gave you an example of how we constructed the vision for our school. Like we provide college credits, certifications, and internships, not because I wanted it, because our students wanted and needed it. So that's become our mission. And when anyone asks, like, what's our mission or our vision for our students, what are we promising them? It's CCI, college credits. Like they know that. Every year there's a new thing. And we obtain this information by sourcing it from students, from staff. And so when we talk about wellness and we talk about like you can't get students to receive the programs and the benefits they want if you don't take care of your staff. And one thing that we always talk about, and I say this a lot in terms of we've become within the profession of education the provider of every possible need. And that takes a toll on educators. We there used to be a time when as an educator you were expected to be, you were the math teacher or you were the English teacher, you were the third grade teacher, like, and there's always going to be a social emotional component. Like you should know what your kids' names are. You should
Yeah.
care about your students. You should like their well-being. But there became a point, I'm not sure where it happened in the timeline of history for education, but there came a point where you became everything. You became the social worker, you became the guidance counselor, you became, their quasi parent in that way. And I bring this up to say that teachers carry a lot, and that lot can lead to burnout. And as I start seeing that over the years, when I first started this as a principal, and even when I was an assistant principal, I noticed a similar trend is there would be some turnover. And that turnover can be okay, right? Sometimes people don't fit with the vision and that's okay. But within my focus of trying to get information from people, we do a survey with our students to determine what it is that their needs are. And sometimes it's explicit, and sometimes we have one that we've been using over the last couple of years that's from a company called the Search Institute. And it provides these like it ultimately asks students a certain number of questions to determine what are their developmental needs. Because I didn't want my teachers to be taking on all of these things. I wanted my teachers to become better at teaching. The
Yes.
better they are at providing instruction, they feel good about the work they're doing. They see the benefits and the outcomes of their students, and they'll get the relationships just build from there. It's very cyclical, right? I become a stronger professional. I engage my students in a way that they clearly see benefits them, and then it comes back in the form of adoration and respect. And that's what you want from your teachers, but it's hard to do that when you're asking them to do 200 different things.
Yes.
So I have a great team of guidance counselors, and they all have different relationship types ways that they build trust with their students. But I wanted the same way that our teachers have the Danielson rubric, the framework for determining how we're going to make them better. We survey the students, and there's a framework. There's 40 different developmental assets that students should have. And I'm not asking my teachers to necessarily build those in, but I'm asking our guidance counselors to and our social workers to look at these needs, like where are the deficits? There's 40 of them. They're great experiences that kids should have, and they're not groundbreaking. They're things like under support. I have a supportive relationship with my parents. Sometimes they don't have that. And you don't need to have all of them, right? If you have 30 or more, your level of success, engaging in achievement academically is much higher. We're
Yes.
talking about like a B plus compared to like a D for a kid who's got like less than 10 of them. The behavior, like they say, like on this scale, the research has shown that if you have less than like 20 of them, your behavioral levels, as soon as you go down to every 10,
Hmm.
your behavior goes down in terms of substance abuse, violence, and early engagement in sexual activity. So all of those things are a form of, like, we want to call it almost a degeneracy. We don't want our children involved in that early because we know it's bad for them. But we also, when you're having a guidance counselor, it's great. They're great at telling you all the things that the kid's involved in, and they know that the kid's willing to tell them all those things. But what are we going to do about it? So this framework has been something where now it's like, well, I'm taking by telling my staff, like, look, I know you want to help our kids in every way, but our counselors are going to be working with our students on this. And you can be supportive when our counselors do these push-in lessons. You'll understand what the background is. And there's some of you that are running clubs, some of you are coaches, and one of those categories happens to be like the student has strong relationship with three individuals who are non-family related. If you're a coach, if you're a club runner, or if you're you just happen to be a teacher that that student loves, you have a place here,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
you are not everything. There are 40 things here, and I just want them to know, like, we are going to attack this in a strategic, clinical way.
Wow. Yeah. We need you across America, to be quite honest with you, because Principal Orbe, that is so thoughtful. I mean, you put such hard work towards that vision that isn't brain science, but but in a lot of places, this is not happening. There's not the intentionality like you had. Um, so in terms of this survey, what I'm hearing too, let me backtrack for a second. I'm
Mhm.
hearing that there's more democracy. I guess that's another way I would put it in your school. So you're talking to the students, they're giving you their point of view. You're listening to teachers, their point of view. There's an ownership and a buy-in where it's just not coming from the district down.
Mhm.
know, and,
Yep.
and you're implementing, you're not even necessarily considering the vantage point of students, parents, and teachers. And I think that makes a big difference. Also, that you're telling the teachers, hey, your main job is to teach. Let me take this off your plate, that off your plate, this off your plate, because that's really not your job. Your job is to bring in your best lessons and to be consistent, so on, and to have a relationship with your students. That takes a lot of stress
Yeah. There's a
off the
lot
plate.
there. There's a lot just right there in
Right
that.
there. Absolutely. And it gets, I start thinking, Principal Orbe, about, simple models that if we use regularly would make a big deal. For instance, going outside of ourselves and looking to the community. Maybe a business adopts a school, or maybe we have, churchgoers coming in to volunteer and doing things at the school, being a presence, forming relationships with some of these kids who lack that. That could be a stabilizing force that again takes the stress off of the educator being the answer to all of these different issues that our kids are coming in with. So this gets me really excited listening to what you're doing.
Yeah, and the reality is, everyone from the district, and this has become like a nationwide, um, pursuit is around the science of reading, literacy, and it is a noble pursuit, and it is the appropriate pursuit. And I'm not saying we're not doing it because we absolutely are. But we always found that the biggest challenge was we keep asking ourselves, like we keep beating ourselves up against the brain, like our heads, and saying like students who have the lowest reading levels, especially wherever they are, but especially when they enter in high school, we keep saying like, oh, well, the solution is going to be this MTSS model where we have like, phonics and then rewards, and we have these, those are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, right? What's really wrong is that we're not listening to how does a student go this far without being able to read, without knowing the full canvas of that child. And so this survey gives us deeper insight. The student gets the results. They sit down with the results. They self-reflect with it. And the ones that have a certain range, like the more vulnerable, they have the vulnerable category, and then it's challenged. Those are the bottom two. The counselors build a case study from that, or a case load from that, and they meet with them. They have groups with them. And the goal is they also build workshops to talk with the parents, because some of them are around, like, take, for example, a simple example. Our parents, like many high school parents, might struggle to be involved. They're working, they're doing all that stuff. No one's putting, no one's pointing fingers at them necessarily. And sometimes you have parents who have really great boundaries, meaning like they have rules, they have structures for their child. But we all know that generation of children are different from my generation to my parents and going forward, right? Like everyone says, like it's not the same. So you can't always put the same rules. And everyone says that this generation is very different, right? Very entitled. And that makes sense because they have access to more things. So they just expect the things that we used to work for, they just have access to it. So we can't blame them necessarily for simply being entitled. We have to learn how to find common ground and have conversations. And that means we must train in those conversations. So our guidance counselors are building workshops where parents will come in and we role play. We role play. How do we talk to your kid? Because it's practice makes perfect, right? We have football teams and we have soccer teams, and every day they do drills, and then we expect them to execute it on the field to win the game. But then we send parents and we're like, look, your kid's different in this generation. You have no idea what they're being exposed to online. Go talk to them, set strong standards and expectations. Good luck. We're not here to help you. No, like we can help you with this. Like
Yes.
we don't even know the answer, but we can do it together.
Oh my goodness. That is wow, phenomenal. And this is my last question because I do want to honor time. Um, how has absenteeism among students, um, how has it become better? And behavior issues. Have you seen that become better too now that they're owning the school a little bit more and their needs are being met?
Absolutely. I mean, we've come so far. I mean, the school has gone from a school that once had a 46% graduation rate with the most weapons confiscated and all that, being like there were 3 fights a day around the building. It was a very chaotic environment where more students were in the hallways than in the classroom, doors locked. Like this is not that school anymore. And I think I said this to you previously was, there came a point where the kids said to me, like, Mister, it's like a white school. And I remember saying, and I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And they would like say to me, like, well, it's like the school, we're focused on academics. We're like, there's not kids in the hallway. It's like I don't have to worry about, getting jumped. And I was like, why would you say that about like it being associated only with one type of like race? I was like, why would you think you don't deserve that? And And they just got in the stuff. And it wasn't just like one time. This probably happened over and over again as we started to turn that corner, as we started to have the programs they wanted, as the kids started coming to school. Because our attendance went from once like an 81%, which sounds good on a test or a quiz, but it's horrible in a 180-day school year. That means like your kids are missing like on average like 40 plus days of school out of 180. Like that's horrible. So to now as a school, we're at like 92, 91% attendance rate is our norm. And our graduation rates are 95% plus as the norm from once to 46%. So like we've come so far and a lot of the things we've talked about, we've all approached it the same way. It's what are students saying? What are our teachers saying? What are our parents saying? And then we execute. This really isn't rocket science. It's my job is not to just envision like think about Steve Jobs. Like Steve Jobs didn't just like come up with the iPhone because he was like, I have a brilliant idea. Often the smartest ideas are from observing and listening to what the people are saying around you. And then you come up with what is the need, and then you execute something that's going to benefit that need and you try it out. You pick yourself up, you try it out again, and that's what we do. And so we've come a long way. I'm very proud of our community. I'm proud of the work that we're doing. And I would say that for anyone who finds themselves in that place right here and now, is that a lot of times the answers are right there in front of you. And the answers are probably right there with your students. Are we are we don't think of ourselves this way. We think of ourselves as educators, but I always think of myself as like, this is a client-driven business. We run pretty much the equivalent of a restaurant, except we're not simply serving food, we're serving, literacy in different subjects. And we have to make that literacy palatable. Like we have to spice it up. We got to do whatever we got to do to make it palatable. But I don't know how much salt or sugar or spice to add to it. They
Yeah.
they got to tell me, how do you like it? Like, how do you want this? Like, we know you got to do this, like, but how do you want this experience to look? No one's going to say to you, I want this to be boring. I want this to be, but I might not know what is exciting for them. So
Yeah.
they need to help tell me. That could lead to trips or whatever it is that kids want, but you have to listen and then you have to work together because maybe they want something that's not totally academic, and you have to find a way to make that, okay, well then maybe that's an incentive to something that is academic.
Mhm.
There's a partnership that has to happen here. There's a discourse and a dialogue, but I found myself more times in my career at a place that needed to change for the better. And I found myself when people ask like, well, are you simply a transformational leader? I could do this anywhere. I could do it at a community that works. I
Yes.
just happen to find myself often in a place that may be struggling because I'm willing to listen.
Principal Orbe, this is a soft sell. Are you out there mentoring and consulting with other principals on this? This is really powerful what you're doing here because this is transformative and it's doable. It doesn't you don't necessarily have to be out of budget, spending oogles and oogles of dollars and throwing dollars to the wind
Mhm.
and not getting anything back. Um, are you doing that yet, or is that your second career?
I'm right now working on my doctorate, and as outside of doing the work I do here, I'm working on my doctorate, and I have been doing like keynotes that I've done, when invited, and that's been a nice opportunity to tell, the story of how far my school has come. I have a book that's being finished up and will be out there and specifically to tell the story as a template to help, leaders. Like I really wrote it for my assistant principals as a guide for them as they step into the stewardship of a principal. I guess I see I am in a school. Um,
Yeah.
so so I'm in terms of consulting, I work with other principals informally. We have a huge district in New York City. I work with principals when I'm asked to, not in the capacity outside of district so much, just because, it's this job in itself is a fairly busy thing. So is it an after thing? If I was approached, if people were interested, I'm available to help others because I know what it means to be in that dark place, and what it means to find the light and rise up. So I want kids anywhere to be able to achieve their potential. And I want educators to be able to see that they have a potential that also can be untapped. And I was extremely fortunate. I have a mentor that I always shout from the top of the mountain
Yeah.
as the one who invested in me. And so that investment is important. And I'm willing to provide it wherever it is that others, who are willing and able to put the work in. And yeah, I would be there.
Well, Principal Orbe, I just want to applaud you for this work, for being, like I said, intentional, for having the gravitas, for being able to hang in there and be resilient, to create an opportunity and a pathway. Because what I'm hearing is that all students have a pathway to success if we are looking to help pave that pathway by listening and then acting on what we hear. That, that's powerful, and I will be chewing on this for quite a while. And you blessed our audience. I want to thank you one more time. And are there any final words that you want to add to our podcast?
No, I applaud you, Dr. Henderson, with the work you're doing. I think this is a topic that a lot of times people say is important, but they might not necessarily put their money where their mouth is, and a lot of people are burning out and educators are becoming harder to find. And this is a very noble career. It's a valuable career that's needed by our society. And, the career has become something that has been attractive to very few. And even as you heard my story, I wasn't necessarily attracted to it. I fell into it. And, you need the right people to be around you so that you can grow, and if you don't get that, I could see why. So we need to, as a community, do better. And I'm glad you're voicing this need. And I hope people out there are listening, that there is hope.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, you've heard it from Principal Orbe. Until next time, peace and blessings. Bye bye for now.